Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. Each week, we speak with top influencers, marketers, and brands who share their experiences, strategies, and tactics for influencer marketing in China. Here's your host, Lauren Hallanan.
Hi, everyone. In this episode of the China Influencer Marketing Podcast, we chat with Mike Michelini, a fellow podcast host, business blogger, and e-commerce expert. Mike's business, Global from Asia, teaches people how to set up and run an e-commerce business in China, both exporting from China, such as an Amazon FBA, or doing cross-border e-commerce selling your products into China. In this episode, we talk a lot about personal branding, growing your network in China, and becoming a business influencer. Mike shares some really great takeaways from his 10 plus years of doing business in China. He's really good at putting himself out there and making relationships with local Chinese people, even if it's been uncomfortable at times. And it really has benefited his career in the long term. Mike has both Chinese and Western audiences, so he also talks about developing, repurposing, and customizing content to suit their different needs. Last week, I mentioned that in a couple of weeks, in early February, I will be speaking at a China business conference in Miami. The conference is actually being held by Mike and Global from Asia, so if you like this podcast, you might want to check out the event. The podcast listeners can receive 30% off of the ticket price using code LHCBW2018 at checkout. Learn more about the event at chinabusinessworkshop.com/Florida. Before we get started, I also just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Parkloo. Parkloo is China's premier influencer marketing platform. Learn more at parkloo.com. And now, on to our interview with Mike. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. Really excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I think it's going to be really interesting to have you on the podcast because we're going to talk about some things that are a little bit different than maybe what we usually talk about on the podcast. So it would be really great if you could start us off by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about what you're currently up to.
Sure. So my name is, as you said, Michael or Mike Michelini. I'm an American, like you, but I always have to say that here in China. I'm an American internet marketer. I've been here since 2007 in China, and I currently am a blogger, podcaster, building a community for cross-border e-commerce between China and overseas for Amazon sellers and e-commerce sellers, and also people importing and selling into China. So kind of going both ways. And it's been a unique. We were talking before the interview. It's unique because we have a mix of Chinese and foreigner or international audience for our. It's more of a B2B community. So that's why I think it'll be interesting to share with your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. So, how did you end up doing e-commerce, and how did you end up in China? I'm just curious. I don't think I've heard your story before.
Sure. So, my story is I always want to start my own business since, I don't know, I feel like when I was in fourth grade, I wrote a timeline as a homework assignment, what you want to be when you grow up, and I kind of drew a timeline like, high school, a good college, a good job, an MBA, and start my own business. But I kind of skipped a lot of those steps. But yeah, I mean, I started to figure out how to, it sounds, scammy, but make money online, obviously. And when I was living in New York City, I worked on Wall Street at Deutsche Bank from 2003 till 2007 and started learning how to sell online in 2004 and just kind of learning drop ships and eBay and buying from Alibaba and global sources and things like that. And then basically, of course, buying products, manufacturing. As we know, a lot's done in China. So, while I was still in New York, in my fifth floor walk up in Lower East Side, I was on Skype with these manufacturers at like 10 p.m. after work, trying to coordinate with them and buying. Of course, I didn't have to live or come to China, but I started talking to other people in my industry. I was doing bar supplies, and they were also frustrated. So started helping people buy from China, and led me to make enough both on my e-commerce and my sourcing services to quit the job. And didn't think I'd live in China, but come to China. And long story short, I'm still here. There's of course a lot more, but basically doing my own e-commerce and buying from China led me here.
Yeah, I think you really lucked out with that. I mean, from what I know, you got into the whole Amazon and sourcing from China thing really early on. I mean, I know it's a really popular topic over the past couple of years, but I think you got in there right like before a ton of people were doing it. It sounds like.
Yeah, there's the good and the bad. Of course, there's the good of being early, but there's challenges of it not being so common, and there's a lot of learning curves, but it's definitely been a growing opportunity, and I think there's still obviously a lot more to go. The biggest fear everybody has is, am I too late to do it? But I think there's still tons of opportunities.
When did you decide to start like building, becoming a blogger and kind of building your own personal brand and launch the podcast and all that? What was the motivation for that?
Sure. It's a funny story, but I always wanted to share, but I was so afraid in Wall Street with compliance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but even when I was doing eBay, I had to fill out forms. I had a company, and so many other of my coworkers were afraid to blog or do YouTube or anything. So I was really shy to even put my name on the internet while I was still in corporate. But what happened was just towards the end in early 2007, my friends there were having some beers at an Irish pub in, downtown Manhattan. And they're like, "Oh, we're so jealous you're actually quitting. We want to quit too, but we'd love to follow your story. We want to hear what happens with you, going full time on your own venture." So I figured out, Blogger, I remember, and started blogging really just for my friends and family at the beginning. And it's addictive. Some people love it, some people hate it, but I liked it, the power of writing once and letting, your friends and family or anybody on the internet to be able to read what is happening. So of course people love the journey to China, and so as early as 2007, I was sharing you can still find it. It's my personal blog is mikesblog.com, but it was just really a journal for anybody that cared to read. But people liked it, and I started learning that it was more effective to getting leads for my business, because people would email my personal blog saying, "Hey, Mike, I see you're in China now. You're doing the sourcing. I also need help. Can you help me?" And we can talk about that more, but it was funny because people were emailing me more on my personal blog sometimes than on my business blog.
Why do you think that is?
So it was 2007, and I was still afraid to look small on my business website. So I don't think I really said I'm one dude working out of my apartment, helping you buy from China. I think maybe that's one thing. I wanted to look really big on my company website. And I think even still to this day, I bet you most websites don't even have like a face on the website. They're just like, contact us with a form. And so I felt like I want to have this bigger image of being like a bigger company. And I didn't really put my personal name at the time on there as much. And I was doing like Google AdWords, I remember, and doing more paid ads. Whereas my personal blog my name was my website and my pictures, and I was very casual. Like, I joke about getting the wrong food delivered from lunch for my Chinese restaurant down the street because I said it wrong, or like just being more real. I always say was really much more helpful for people to engage with me and approach me and connect with me.
Yeah, I think it's funny looking at it back in hindsight, right? Because I think now a lot of like content marketers, and, influence, I guess people teaching about, growing an influence and things like in your personal brand and everything, they're always talking about that now. They're saying like, you need to include a picture, you need to have a great about me page, you need to like speak with your own personal voice. And, so we hear all that stuff now, but like back then, 10 years ago, people weren't really talking about that. And so you kind of accidentally did that through your personal blog and got all of these leads because people just like liked and trusted you because they could understand who you were as a person, whereas like your website was just too, like there wasn't enough information on it that couldn't connect with anything on there. So I just think it's really interesting how we look back at that in hindsight and it's like, oh yeah, duh. Like,
I know. I wish I didn't listen to my fraternity brothers in college because they made fun of my blog way early. It wasn't even before blogs existed, but I had my website. I got my full name, michaelmichelini.com, and I just put like my about me, and I was still in college, and they were just picking on me so much for having that, and it delayed me a little bit, but I still came back and did it anyway a few years later.
Yeah, I mean it's sad because I think a lot of people, even myself included, we don't put stuff up there or publish things because we're just afraid of what other people might think. When actually people would really love to read our content or see our videos and things like that.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I think now, fast forward to now, you've established, I think, quite a reputation in China, and you have your podcast has tons of episodes. You've been doing this for several years now, right? Your podcast?
Yeah, 2013. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're attending a lot of events, and your business has grown. So, how have you grown your influence in China and in this particular field? Because I think now you're doing something a little bit different than what you were back then. Like you're not only, helping people source products. You're doing a lot more than that, right?
Sure. So there was an evolution, but even when I was in China my first year or two, I I got lucky finding really amazing students, which are now like doing very well. It's actually funny; they're still my friends and fans in their own business. But they would start to tell me about different industry events in China. Um, Unfortunately, my Chinese wasn't that good then, and it still needs a lot of improvement. It's much better now, but it's pretty hard. But it was a pure Chinese events, and even in 2008, I remember going to some internet marketing conferences, e-commerce conferences, and being the only foreigner out of like hundreds or sometimes thousands of attendees. I think you know what I'm talking about. In China, these events can be huge. So I think just by going there, and while I couldn't maybe understand the presentations as much as I wish I could, I was able to network with, even without Chinese languages so strong, in English speaking Chinese people that were curious to see why I was there, what I was doing, wanting to help me, wanting to learn more from me. And I can always remember that. And I started even going to the universities. I was hiring these students for e-commerce. They had an e-business program. I was getting really great team members for my business, and I was going to these events. And I made a Chinese blog. I think I sent it to you. This is, before even Weibo or WeChat. So there was not much people blogging then. And I was still always trying Chinese websites and engage with Chinese people. So I started transitioning to go both ways. And a lot of times it would sometimes just be the English language of my English blogs. And sometimes actually what happened was some of the students working with me would volunteer to translate my blogs to Chinese and posting them because they just thought it was really amazing. And some would be able to read my English blogs and comment, and some would like my Chinese blogs. So I just started really almost the same content. But I think the bigger, more effective was attending and speaking at events in China. And I started getting invited to speak in English. And I think, Lauren, and maybe listeners too, whether it's sometimes a little bit not, even though I wasn't maybe as experienced as some of the other people in the audience, by being a foreigner in China, of course, I had some advantages. So I was speaking, of course, I had experiences, but I was speaking at pretty huge events. I remember in going to Xiamen with thousands of people, and I spoke about keyword research and e-commerce. And so, of course, speaking at one event or attending one event, we go to another event, and I started even being involved with some of the associations by inviting foreigners to these events. In 2011, I was part of an e-commerce association in China. So it was really amazing opportunities. Just, of course, I'm an expert. I mean, I was an expert, but especially just by being a foreigner in China and so many foreigners come to China and just hang out with other foreigners, I think, and, of course, it's comfortable even for me too to spend time with people I have similar culture and perspective as me. I try my best to usually listening to my staff and what they were interested to go to, and they like to take me. So,
yeah, I think it's really smart that you got Chinese staff so early on who could really help you and support you too. I think there's been some other people on the show that have talked about, like, as foreigners, if you're looking to be successful in China, it's really important to have support from Chinese people who can kind of give you the in on everything that's going on and everything. It's it's not enough just to be like in your own little foreign bubble if you really want to be successful.
Exactly.
So nowadays, because this was a while ago, so nowadays, what platforms do you use to kind of spread your message in China and grow your influence in China?
Sure. Well, there's a middle part. So the first early stage was just translating my blogs into Chinese. And then at Weibo, I got onto Weibo. I remember when or Sina Weibo. Of course, listeners might know there was other Weibos, but for now there's basically just Sina Weibo. But I was on a different Weibos. I remember being at an internet marketing conference in Xiamen when they were just launching in, I think it was 2009, and then. So I used Weibo for quite a few years, but I kind of stopped updating it. Honestly, I think I have an if this then that rule that posts it from my Instagram sometimes. But for now, I'm mostly using WeChat and WeChat personal accounts and official accounts for primarily China. And I might upgrade my Chinese blog because I realized it's got a really old WordPress version. I might actually upgrade it, honestly. But primarily now, of course, as probably most of your guests said, is WeChat. Even Weibo is not as effective as it used to be for me. I have a decent following on it for B2B market, but it's pure WeChat, which of course is a few different channels inside of WeChat itself, which we can dig into.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? Like, you have an official account and then your personal account? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but it's even a little bit more complex. So I have a personal account that's for my company. So I have another phone number, which is with my company, Local Global from Asia. And that's like a dedicated chat, which is actually sometimes more effective than the official account for use. Because I don't want people to all add my personal WeChat account as Mike. I have a personal account with my company logo that we also share the moments, and we have group moderating. And of course, I have an official account where we post a weekly, it's a service level account. So we do 4 pushes a month with every week, usually on Thursday night, China time, with all of our blogs and podcasts localized to Chinese internet, both somewhat in the language to Chinese, but definitely for the file hostings of the audio and the video.
That's smart. I think that's really interesting that you have like a personal account, like a personal business account, because I think a lot of people get really frustrated with, I know, it's just like, it's really hard to you feel like you're always working because the two are combined, and
Exactly.
and also just I bet especially for you, there's a lot of messages coming in that like you yourself don't necessarily need to handle, that other people can hop onto that WeChat and be answering questions and, like you said, moderating groups and things. And so it's like anybody can use it, but people feel like it's a little bit more personal still. Like they still feel like they're connecting with you and your company, but like you don't have to deal with your phone buzzing nonstop all day long.
Exactly. Because like with Weibo, I could let one of my team members log into my account with the browser, but WeChat personal accounts are really trying to be locked to one person or one location at a time. You can't have multiple people. That's why, of course, they try to push you to the official account. But honestly, the official account's a little bit hard to use as I feel, a customer service. I know you can click chat and chat to them, but then it only goes. I know there's apps you can third-party apps you can download, so it connects to a mobile app, but it seems like it's meant for web-based chatting, and so we really use a lot of our customer service for the personal account of our Global from Asia, rather than the serviced account or official account, which is more just for content hosting and pushing.
Yeah, it doesn't seem as, because I've like booked appointments or tried to contact companies through service accounts, and it seems like the same as when you go onto a website, and they have the little box pop up that's like, do you have any questions? Ask us. And then you never really know. You're like, is this a person or is this a robot? And like, I feel like they're not really answering my question, and like you still don't feel like you've actually connected with someone who's like helping you. So I think if they add you on that personal WeChat account, they know it's like there's a real person answering this question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other good thing that, because we have different staff, and I'm always a little bit afraid. I don't want to, I think, as a business owner, I don't want to say, oh, here's this new team member's personal account, everybody add her or him, and then you kind of have all your clients or followers go to a personal account that you can't really tell them to give to you if they quit the company, right? As far as turnover. So when I started to notice that to start to happen, and I talked to some others, and plus, it's good for group moderation. You can pass the phone. It takes your personal brand a little bit separate out of it. And then what I do is I make groups with that account. So somebody messages me personally, and maybe it's something that the customer service team could help with. I could make a group with that customer service, and then they can connect, and then I can get out of the middle. Because like we're talking about B2B here, so it is a little bit more, it's not as automated, or it's not like a buy now kind of conversion, right? It's more like higher touch, more communication, longer lead time. So we've also noticed when they're connecting with this personal company account, they follow the moments. And unfortunately, the official accounts don't really go into moments. It's so hard, I feel. I don't know if you or your previous guest would agree. It's challenging to promote an official account in WeChat, so sometimes it's been a little bit more effective with that personal company account.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying in the beginning about your company website versus your blog. It's just like sometimes the official WeChat account is just not as personable, not as like you can't connect with it as much. So
so it's really become just a place where we host our content, and people. Of course, we have subscribers, and it's been growing, and we can talk about the type of content too. But we have various different types of content. We measure analytics and what's working. And
yeah, what type of, do you think that I guess you can't really tell, but do you get a lot of Chinese subscribers, or do you think it's like a mix of foreigners and Chinese people?
Yeah, our group is so challenging because we have, I think it's 3 different kind of groups. So you have the foreigners outside of China or international, right? And then you have the expats inside of China that maybe don't speak Chinese as well, and then there's the Chinese business owners. So our official account has a mix of expats and Chinese business owners. And we've noticed it's so scary, when you do that push, you push that subscription, because we have a service account. So it goes right into somebody's feed. And it's very sensitive that people seem like they don't like what they get. It's fairly easy to unsubscribe an account. So we've always measured we've tried different types of content that we push in different languages, but we've kind of veered towards the Chinese language on the official account because we feel that the expats in China could still use our website more. So it's more Chinese language, and the most effective content has been video content, video interviews. So we've been starting to interview more and more Chinese executives in the e-commerce space that is trying to do it in English, but we have subtitles in English and Chinese. And what's really cool is a lot of these executives don't like to be interviewed so much, but because we're international or cross-culture, cross-border, they're more open to us because they want that international exposure. But a lot of Chinese also want to get that content. So we've noticed some of these really successful businessmen or women are very popular. And so the video interviews, it's me and a guest, and I'm always speaking in English with my questions. We've tried to encourage them to speak in English, but a lot of times they're not comfortable enough, so they speak in Chinese. And then we have dual language subtitles, and it's been really, really popular. I mean, it's really engaged the audience much more. Their definitely views are much higher, and engagement and requests to be on the show has grown because they want to also get people overseas to know them. What's starting to happen is a lot of these e-commerce companies are IPOing, so they want that extra exposure. I don't know if you're involved with the industry or know the industry, but a lot of these eBay, e-commerce, Amazon sellers don't want to be so high profile because they're kind of making money, and it's not really beneficial that people know them, right, as an individual or as a company. They're just selling on eBay, Amazon, but now they kind of want to get their profiles up to get more investor interest and more other benefits. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm guessing that you're also publishing these videos on your your website or something that's outward facing, that's more for a Western audience as well.
Yeah, it's really it's so challenging though, because the content is a little bit different. It's the interests are different on both sides, so we're really trying to figure out. Podcasts aren't so. There's of course Himalaya in China. You might have heard.
Mm-hmm.
You probably,
Himalaya FM. Yeah.
Himalaya, yeah, and others, and even WeChat has their own audio. But of course, I think Chinese like video more. So, but mostly I feel our international likes the audio podcast, especially for long form content. So we have these 20, 30-minute interviews on video. So we're trying to leverage the content on text, audio, and video. And then also it's challenging because I don't know, I feel like the international market doesn't really want to see any Chinese, right? Like, whereas in China, people are more understanding for dual language or these subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I think,
My dad watched something the other day that was like in a different language, and he's just like, "Thank goodness I got my new glasses. Otherwise, I mean, these subtitles are so difficult." And it just I kept thinking, like, in China, anytime anyone watches anything, they're reading the subtitles. Like,
yeah, exactly. So it's a different
mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's our advantage too. We do have a pretty decent balance on both sides, and that's why we're trying to grow this community of both. They both want to know each other, but the culture is so different. We're trying to target the more higher level executive in this e-commerce industry, both on the international and Chinese side. The other funny benefit I've noticed is some of these guests I've interviewed, they're very, very. One was Patrick, and he's at Star Merch is his company, and he's doing $10 million a month in sales on Amazon, but primarily. And he's Chinese born. I believe he went to Tsinghua, the most famous university.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went to, I I don't want to make a mistake, but a top university in the U.S. for his PhD, and then he worked at Amazon and Google, and now he started his own e-commerce business. And then when I interviewed him, I had just met him for the first time, but he's like, "Oh, I remember some of your blogs on Weibo, many years ago. I've been following, I follow your story and your updates." And I was like, "Wow, that's awesome. This
Wow.
guy,
That's crazy.
yeah." So it's a long-term game, content creation, and as you know, so but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just really targeting these. There's so many making so much money on e-commerce now. So
Definitely. So, I'm curious. When you were using, because I think when you were using Weibo before, was it a lot more? Because that was like back when Weibo had first come out. So was it a lot more chatting and connecting with people then? Because I feel like now, especially, Weibo is more about like following people, and it's not as much of. I mean, I know it's a social network, but it's not really as social. Like you don't actually, if you talk with somebody on Weibo, you're not actually like making a connection with them.
I'm glad you asked. I missed the old Weibo. Actually, I don't know. I feel like Twitter used to be more like social too. I remember those. It was so much fun because everybody was just kind of figuring it out, and everybody was just at mentioning everybody, both on Twitter and Weibo, and like 2008, 2009, 2010, and I was but specifically for Weibo, yeah, I mean, it was so amazing because it was open, like WeChat, I feel like I think you agree, is much more closed to meet people or new people. So I was able to make so many relationships. I was purposely doing it to network. So, and I was sharing my blog. So I would have a 163 blog, and I would have my English blog translated with pictures. And Chinese like to see, an American or foreigner in China doing business and the experiences. So they were engaging with that, and then they were, private messaging me. Or I was private messaging them, or there was all these app mentions because there was no WeChat. Everybody's just on Weibo, and Tencent was trying to make their own Weibo. But this is Sina, and it was just so amazing to make relationships because people were just so open and easy to connect with each other, make friends with each other. I really miss those days, and I mean, there would be a lot of engagement in your comments, and people would respond everybody would respond so fast in messaging. It was amazing, and I've been brought this up a few times, if in my content, but I met my wife on Weibo. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
That's pretty crazy.
Really great friends, and it's like, I think one of the posts she liked the most. I remember one of the first posts she engaged back with me was I was in Dalian and I was trying to buy new sneakers, and I held up a fake Nike shoe and a fake Adidas shoe, and I said, which shoe should I buy, the fake Adidas or the fake Nikes? And people were like commenting of which one they liked, and I remember it's a pretty high level. People were like laughing and commenting, and she was definitely one. And I was doing more lead outreach, so I was. She always wants people to say that I added her first or I followed her first. She followed back, and then. But yeah, I mean, again, just like I mentioned earlier in the show, like being a foreigner at a meet event, it was also being a foreigner in Weibo. WeChat's much easier for, I think, anybody to use, but Weibo, a lot of foreigners didn't bother using it. I remember they didn't have the English interface, so foreigners didn't want to bother using a Chinese app with Chinese language, so it wasn't.
And also back then there wasn't video, and I don't know if they even had the picture function introduced back then. Well, I guess they did have pictures, but it was a lot of words too, which can be really overwhelming for someone who's Chinese, depending on your Chinese level, just like pages of words and words and words.
Yeah, that was true, because that was another thing. Twitter was I think it's 100 or was or is 144 characters, something like that. But in China, they also did the same amount of characters, but each character is not a letter; it's a word. So that's a lot of words. And I remember Chinese always telling me that, reminding me of that. But yeah, I mean, it was really great, and then it was so open. You would see who your friends were, who other friends were, and people could mention other people. Whereas I think we know in WeChat moments, even if they're common friend, I think no common friends see who likes, but if they're not common friends, they don't see other people's comments or likes, which is
Right.
harder. There's different, of course, there's pros and cons on both sides, but I would be able to meet people like even on Facebook now. You have a friend that comments and they're not friends with your friend, but they see his comment, they connect with each other. But on WeChat, it doesn't happen. But on Weibo, that was happening so often, and yeah, I made a lot of great friends on Weibo.
And now it's time for Parklu Influencer Marketing Insights. Chinese millennials and Gen Z steal the KOL marketing spotlight. Though it's true that the vast majority of KOLs are millennials or from Generation Z, it would be a mistake to assume that KOL marketing can't reach Chinese parents, adults, and seniors. There's a stigma that Chinese parents, adults, and seniors are extremely frugal. A recent study by McKinsey showed that 45 to 55-year-olds actually have a spending pattern similar to 30 to 45-year-olds, with 35% allocating money for food and 14% to apparel. Older customers are savvy mobile users and online shoppers. A recent study by KPMG and May.com revealed that 81% of non-millennials claim to shop online at least once a week. 13% said KOLs influence their purchasing decisions, and 16% said the same for social media recommendations, compared with 20% in both categories for millennials. Brands looking to target Chinese parents, adults, and seniors obviously need to collaborate with influencers who fit their target demographic, which may seem tough to do, considering that the majority of KOLs we see on media tend to be relatively young. However, non-millennial KOLs, or those born after 1982, do exist. You can find a number of them in a piece we've published on chinainfluencermarketing.com/Parklu. Enjoy the rest of your show.
Okay, so I want to kind of switch topics a little bit and talk more about e-commerce, because even though maybe it doesn't seem like it's directly connected to influencer marketing, but I think it is in some ways, because especially China cross-border e-commerce, people who are people from outside of China who are selling their products into China, once they get all of the platforms set up and everything, which is what you're an expert at, after they do all that, then they're probably going to need influencers to help them market their product. So I think that there are some people listening who are also going to be interested in China cross-border e-commerce just because they're somewhat related. Does that make sense?
Yep. Of course.
So since you are an expert in that, I would like to get some tips from you on that. So what are some key things that people need to consider if they want to sell products in China?
Sure. I mean, it's the first thing I think is differentiation a little bit. I mean, what's your angle, and is it already in China or not? Or I don't even know it exists or not. And is it something that's Chinese would prefer to buy outside of China than inside of China? Of course, there's the funniest stories I think is stuff is made in China, but they still prefer to buy it outside of China, like even clothing or electronics. So I think you probably should research a little bit about the market and this product. Is it already selling on Tmall, Taobao, etc.? And the best would be if it's your brand, but of course making your own brand is a huge investment of everything. So if you're going to sell somebody else's brand, try to get some kind of, as much as you possibly can, some kind of an exclusivity in China, at least a certain amount of time, so that you're not just building their brand and they can maybe say thank you and change somebody else or have other people sell that product in China would be some things to think about. And I think it's again about the long term. I think just like any business, the beginning is the hardest. Trying to maybe give away free samples, get some testimonials, of course KOLs, which is your podcast is great for, and trying to get that leverage that KOL not just for their own channel or their following, but on your own, make content out of that, right? And like using that as a testimonial or as social proof. I think anywhere inside of China, outside of China, people want to buy something that people they trust or like or connect with are also using. So each one of those is, of course, I could dive deeper into, but I think a lot of times people
those are some great tips.
Yeah, everybody wants to. Well, not everybody, but so many people have that China dream, and if I get $1 from 1.3 billion people, I could retire, of course. But it's you got to have an angle to get that $1 from a billion people. But
yeah, and also I think that type of China dream isn't really, maybe it was possible before, but I don't think it's possible now because I think the market has become so fragmented. Like there's so many different types of consumers and there's so many different areas in China where people have different habits and different lifestyles. And I think that the people who actually focus in on a particular smaller group of people and get those people to really like their products have better success nowadays in China than the people who are like, oh, if I can get $1 from everyone,
Exactly. Yeah, of course. There's different tier cities and different, of course, demographics. And there's, of course, we always talk about WeChat, but there are other platforms that are hot for different markets and things like that. So I think you got to understand. I don't know. I always try to tell people, come out here for a little while. I think it'll be a huge eye opener and it'll be hopefully fun. Some people hate it. Some people love it. But, it's going to be really hard to do it all remotely unless maybe somehow magically can find a partner or distributor. You also got to think about your distribution strategy. Sure, you can do B2C, cross-border. You can ship from the US. Actually, sometimes they prefer it. Some people want to, actually have stock in China, but a lot of times the consumers prefer it to be shipped B2C from outside of China because they know it's real. Whereas they feel like, if you have it stocked in China, even though you say it's the real one, they sometimes don't trust that's a big issue, right? It's the trust factor in China. Well, it's the advantage too for foreign products. But
yeah, we talked about in one of my early episodes, I had on Tom, he's Australian and he does Daigou, and he was saying how he sells a lot of products that are available online in China, but people still want to buy them from him because he will buy it in Australia and then he'll he actually signs the bottom or the container. He signs the bottom of all the containers of if it's baby formula or whatever. And then that way that they know that it's actually it's because he said that there's been some incidences where it's even gotten switched at customs or things like that. And so he signs the bottom and then people are like, oh, this is really trustworthy because you can't you know what I mean? It's
exactly.
They really know that it's the same product that is being sold in Australia.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what do you think are some markets that you see or industries that you see becoming more popular in China over the next couple of years? Do you see any really good industries that people might want to get into?
I'm not sure if they're so new or unique, but I still see opportunity if you're creative enough. But one was, I think, pets. I don't know if that's so new, but Chinese love pets. And you should go specifically into dog or cat or etc. But I think pet kind of products, accessories, or food. I've met some people that are coming here that are getting that overwhelming response from Chinese finding their English website and figuring out how to buy on their English website. So I think pets kind of products, Chinese are it's a sign of wealth if you have dogs, or maybe not just dogs, but pets in your house. As obviously as a growing middle class continues here, would be one. Still, education or children is obviously, I don't think, new, but Chinese, I've always loved to learn. I mean, and their children, they'll do anything for. Like, I'm a new father with a Chinese wife, so I get to hear it firsthand. But, we're already thinking about college and, thinking about schools. So anything in education or children kind of product, they trust, trust foreign education more. And so anything in those industries where you can try to have an edge, and of course baby products or any kind of consumables, anything that goes back to trusting, trust, and especially if it's repeatable, they have to keep buying it. Any kind of subscription, if somebody can really crack the subscription, I'm not sure if it's hot in the US too, but any kind of subscription model could be great. But I'm not sure if those are new ideas, but I still see opportunities. Maybe pets would be something I don't think talked about enough, and I see more and more.
Yeah, I think that's definitely over the past couple of years. I think it's been kind of silently growing, but I did actually see an article recently that was talking about that. That's kind of like a new hot market because more and more people are getting dogs and cats, and I guess they're starting to treat them more like the way that we do in the West, where we buy them clothes and we get them toys and we want to do all this fun stuff for them. Whereas maybe before it was just like, oh, it's a dog. Like they don't need their own toys and beds and things, and now people are treating pets like we do, like they're like our kids, our family members. And so there's like a whole new set of products that they're willing to buy, where before they might not have considered buying like gourmet dog food. Like now they actually would.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, and it still also could be good in anywhere in the world. I think people are crazy about pets, so it seems like they'll pay anything.
Definitely. I know my dog tears up every toy we buy her, so we're constantly buying new toys because they're gone within like a week or two of us getting them. So we're definitely recurring customers.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to start to wrap things up. So I wanted to know if you have any like special events or projects or anything that you're really excited about that's coming up in the future that you would like to share with everybody.
Sure. So I have my annual conference every April. So we'll have our third annual this April 20th and 21st in Shenzhen, China. So if anybody happens to come over, we do it that time of year because there's the trade show season for all the people coming from overseas. So it's a great time where we bring our Chinese executive audience and our foreigners and get to meet all the people in the community. So if you happen to have travel plans to South China in April, I'd love to see you guys at our Crossborder Summit in Shenzhen. And we've been doing more and more events and workshops, so we've been kind of building out an events page on the site at Global from Asia. So we try to keep everything up to date there. And like I said earlier, events still seems, while, I think, online content is amazing. Like you and I are making this great interview. People still love to network and see people live. So we're going to keep growing the different offline type events as well as still growing our content online.
Definitely, you can't replace that personal connection.
It's true. Well, the platforms have changed. I think for listeners, and probably you've said this a lot in your other shows, is it's still about trust, and especially in China, but I think everywhere. I mean, your podcast or content or anybody's blogs or social media accounts is consistency and being there. And what I've noticed too is as Chinese, especially being married here, living here, being here so long, and they'll trust you more. So just like anything in life, it's never going to be fast and easy. If anybody says that, it's usually you'd be wary. but it does have long-term. I mean, of course, it's a long-term investment with long-term, benefits too.
Cool.
Well, thanks for having me, Laura.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Mike. You can find links to his website and his contact info in the show descriptions or in the show notes on ChinaInfluencerMarketing.com. Of course, before you go, I want to share a couple of my key takeaways from this episode. Mike mentioned a couple times throughout the episode the importance of adding personality to your business and to your brand. Consumers and potential clients want to get to know, like, and trust you before doing business with you. Too many people, especially in B2B businesses, worry about wanting to look professional, and they want their website and marketing to not have any personal information on it. But this often ends up feeling very cold and distant. Mike mentioned how his personal blog actually ended up getting him more clients than his company website did. I also thought it was really interesting how he uses a WeChat official account for content distribution, but he uses a personal WeChat account for customer service, networking, and developing relationships with potential business partners. It's true that in China, a lot of people, most people, use WeChat way more than they use email. And I think it's really smart that he makes people add a business personal WeChat account instead of his personal account or an employee's personal account. I totally understand what he said. The turnover rate is high in China, and it's not like if you have a company email and then you can force the employee to give up the company email when they leave your company. You can't force them to give up their personal WeChat account and all the contacts when they leave the company. So I think it's really smart the way that he keeps the contacts on his business WeChat account. And he also mentioned that people are more likely to look at the moments of that account than the official account articles. So I thought that was really interesting as well. I also really resonated with what he was saying about relying on local staff. I've also heard a lot of influencers that I've interviewed have said this as well, that they have assistants and local Chinese people that they depend on. They've really got their pulse on everything. And I think that Mike's business and his personal relationships would not be where they are today if he hadn't turned to Chinese interns very early on in his China experience. The last thing I want to point out that in this digital age, it's wonderful how we can connect through WeChat, through LinkedIn, through this podcast, but don't neglect the importance of face-to-face conversations and forming relationships face-to-face. It's really important to go to events and to meet people in real life and not just virtually. And also, if you're in China, don't only go to events filled with foreigners. That's easier to do. You know that you can talk to everyone and it might be a lot less uncomfortable. But it's important to go to events where you might be the only foreigner there. Although there are more foreigners in China than before, there are still a ton of events that will barely have any foreigners at them, and that can really help you stand out in the crowd and potentially meet some people that you probably wouldn't have met at an event that was in English and mainly targeted at foreigners. So that's it for my takeaways. I'd love to hear what you thought of the episode. You can leave me a comment on ChinaInfluencerMarketing.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you liked this episode and know somebody else who might like it too, please don't forget to share. Thanks, and talk to you next week.